Hello and welcome to At the Apex. My name is Matt and I'm your host. Today I have Ryan O'Connor, and today we're going to be talking about a few different things. We're going to cover the LA Auto Show, some of the new cars that came out from that, who we are and why we're here, and just what it's like being a car enthusiast in Saskatchewan, Canada. And then at the end we're going to just talk about some affordable sports cars that, kind of get us going and what we think might be the best one. All right, so let's get into this. So, like I said, my name's Matt, and I'll just start telling you a little bit about myself. I'm a huge Formula One fan. I'm just going to get that out there right now. And so we will be discussing some races throughout the season. And I know the Formula One calendar just finished, so I'm kind of crushed about that. I have to wait 4 months before the next race. And so why are we here? Why am I doing this podcast? And, it all comes down to I like talking about cars, and I know other people like talking about cars, and, this is just a way for us to have a good, fun time talking about cars. So for me, I never really got into cars or the car scene until I was in my late teens. I lived a very sheltered life growing up, and I got exposed to this in my high school years. Finally, in my late teens, I discovered Formula One, and that just kind of started the ball rolling. I got into the technology, got into racing, got into looking at how the technology rolled down into everyday cars, and then I started looking at supercars, and everything just exploded from my discovery of Formula One. And today I've got Ryan O'Connor here, and so I'll let him kind of talk about himself.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Well, I think one of the best parts about doing a podcast with you is we've spent so many times not recording what we talk about that this is basically just putting a mic in front of us and doing the same thing as normal.
Yeah.
Although I don't think I need to tell you that I'm not a huge fan of F1. So I'm sure we're going to have some really interesting discussions about that. Maybe you'll sway me by the end of this. We'll have to see. What really got me into cars and talking about cars is I did start autocrossing and racing when I was 16 and got me into the automotive trade and became a certified mechanic, and then I just kept breaking my cars, and I think it kind of started in that way, which probably led to my long history of owning a variety of different cars, and most of the time for the purpose of autocross. I don't think there's a single person out there who would argue that an old 70s RX-7 is not a good daily driver, but that's also probably half the reason why I had to fix my cars so often. I also do have a great love of the technology that's really gone into it. I have a new 8.6, and learning all about how that direct injection works is something that absolutely amazes me. Going from an old carburetor to 4 injectors with a direct injection system that's similar to hybrid fuel mileage in some cases is really interesting. So even having newer cars and transitioning to newer cars really got me interested in looking into different things that are coming out. Which I guess is a good segue into the LA Auto Show.
Yeah, so the LA Auto Show just was last weekend, and there's lots of new SUVs that were coming out. With the announcement that GM is shutting down a bunch of their North American plants to focus on SUVs, similar to what Ford had announced several months ago. It makes sense that lots of brands are launching new or updated SUVs. Seems to be what people want. So companies like Hyundai, Lexus, Kia, Lincoln, they all came out with new SUVs. But some highlights for me, one was the new Audi e-tron GT concept. For me, this is the most exciting reveal, mostly because of the move towards electrification of the auto industry in the last few years, and it seems like this is going to be a trend that continues, especially with the strict fuel economy requirements coming, especially in Europe. So Audi's e-tron GT concept, it's a sedan. It's got a 400-kilometer range, or 200 and I think 84 miles. All-wheel drive, 590 horsepower, or 434 kilowatt power, and will do 0 to 100 in 3.5 seconds. The main competitor for this that Audi is trying to go up against is the current king, the Tesla Model S. And the one interesting thing is that this particular car, the Audi e-tron GT, is sharing a lot of the same parts. Effectively, the underpinnings are identical to what's coming in the new Porsche Taycan. It's a new vehicle that Porsche has launched, and I think it's going on sale in 2020.
But here's my question for you, Matt. Do you think that this is a new trend we're entering of enthusiast sedans, sort of like when the WRX STIs and the Evos came about in their four-door sporty appeal? That was different than anything we've seen before.
Yeah, part of it I think is people are seeing the performance benefits of an electric engine, not an engine, electric motor. They prove this in things like the 918 Spider, where by adding those electric motors, they were able to significantly boost performance, and it really moved electric away from people viewing it purely as just for fuel economy only.
Something more than just a hybrid assist system kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So people are like enthusiasts are being able to look at these electric vehicles nowadays and say, this isn't just a terrible car that has an electric engine and it just gets me from A to B. This can be a fun car that will do 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 in like supercar level numbers for in a vehicle that isn't it's like a family sedan, right? You can just go and comfortably drive around in.
I'm just wondering what you think the future is going to hold. I was looking at the new NSX. It's a hybrid electric, and now a lot of these companies are moving more towards the full electric vehicles. And it's hard to argue that performance isn't going to outperform gasoline engines before we know it. And I'm just surprised that a lot of these companies are going straight to the four-door sedans.
Well, I think it's they're trying to get into the mainstream. People, even though they're abandoning sedans left, right, and center here, and people are starting to focus on purchasing SUVs. It is an interesting idea that these companies are starting to manufacture electric sedans, but Tesla has proven that people buy them, and in droves. Like Tesla hit all kinds of production records with their Model 3. So people want sedans, but they don't want the boring old sedans that people have been making. So I think that's why people are jumping on the bandwagon around performance electric sedans, which eventually will become electric SUVs. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. So moving on, then the next vehicle that I wanted to just quickly talk about, and it has been fairly publicized around the LA Auto Show, and there's been a lot of hype around it, is the new Jeep Gladiator pickup truck. So it's based on the Wrangler, which, if you see any pictures of it, is apparent. It looks exactly like a Wrangler from the front, which is not a bad thing. I personally like the look of a Wrangler. So it's going to be a mid-size pickup, so it's going to compete things like the Tacoma, the Colorado, that kind of level of vehicle. And so should be offering the class's best in towing rating of 7,650 pounds, which is quite a lot for a vehicle of that class. So some other things that they're hoping, or at least people are expecting the Gladiator to be able to do, since it's based on the Wranglers, is being able to really take it off road and use it like they do a Wrangler. Being able to take it through a creek. The Wrangler right now has 30 inches of water clearance. Like, you can drive it through a 2.5-foot deep river and be perfectly fine. So hopefully they bring that in the production model. So any thoughts on the new Gladiator?
Well, and from what I've been reading about it, trying to follow the whole Wrangler idea has, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, the whole idea of the fold down windshield, soft or hard tops, like the doors can be removed to give you that whole open air experience. See, I'm not a big Jeep guy, but I know that's always kind of been the appeal of them. I mean, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, if this is the angle they're trying to go with this vehicle, sort of the do-all Jeep experience kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think because Jeep is doing so well for the FCA group, that people are really attracted to Jeeps, and they're trying to capitalize on that. But yeah, people like trucks, people like Jeeps. It makes sense to make a Jeep pickup, and to not abandon what Jeep is really all about. Jeeps going back to the 40s, they had those removable doors, removable tops, things like that, and people want that. It's part of what makes a Jeep a Jeep. So the next notable announcement for me was the new Mazda 3. Now, the Mazda 3 itself is, a very popular subcompact car. You see them everywhere, and it's less about the car itself for me. The redesign is quite sleek. I personally like it. I wouldn't say it's a revolution, but it's definitely an evolution of their current design, keeping in line with the redesigned, the new CX-9, the CX-5, all those kinds of new redesigns that Mazda has been going through. The new Mazda 3 follows that same design language. But the most important thing is that they have announced this with the new SkyActive-X homogeneous charge compression ignition engine, or HCCI. And what that is supposed to be doing is it's an evolution of that SkyActive-X or SkyActive technology that they've been working on for so many years. And they say that this particular one will give you a 20% fuel economy boost over the current SkyActive engine that they have in the current model. And at the same time, bumping up horsepower significantly, and torque up as well. So, I think Mazda is doing some really great things with the gasoline engines that they're producing these days.
Well, and I've been following the Mazda 3s as well. I'm just wondering if they're ever going to bring back the Mazda Speed 3. Looking at this redesign, it looks like it could be in its own essence a Speed 3. But I know it's just that new modern styling.
Yeah, you know what? Because there has been a lot of focus on hot hatches and things like that. Like the Focus RS, it did really well, but Ford decided to stop producing the Focus, so obviously that one died out. But the Fiesta ST is doing really well globally. Even in North America, you see quite a few Fiesta STs around. So I think there's definitely room in the market for that Mazda Speed 3 to come back. But it's a matter of, is Mazda trying to focus on just developing this high fuel efficiency engine, or is there room in the lineup for something that's more performance or enthusiast centered?
Well, and I think we both know, Matt, that it's that enthusiast, that halo car that doesn't really bring in the money to these companies, and something like that would be a specialty car. The Ford Focus RS was a specialty car. people didn't just go and pick them up from the dealerships because they just wanted a 4-door hatchback to drive around in. But I've always thought with the partnership that Mazda and Ford have always had, if they'd ever considered a crossover of that Ford Focus RS technology into a new Mazda Speed 3 or a Mazda Speed something. You know, the old Speed 3s were just front-wheel drive, and the Speed 6s had that all-wheel drive, but were the bigger, bulkier sedan. If there's ever going to be I've always kind of hoped for a happy medium of an all-wheel drive Speed 3, maybe with some Ford Focus RS infused technology, but I don't think we live in that same market anymore where people would be willing to put their money down on that.
Yeah, I don't know if Mazda has that. I don't know if people view Mazda in the same way anymore. I think people are, when you think of Mazda, at least to me nowadays, I think of a CX-5, I think of, a CX-7, which both are SUVs. But personally, as an auto enthusiast, I would love to see a new Mazda Speed 3. I think they were great cars. But Mazda didn't seem to want to continue it for whatever reason. I see quite a few of them, and even now there's still some kicking around. But yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping Mazda decides to put some money into developing that, but only time will tell on that one.
Well, I mean, they have their Miata, and that's sort of there's minimal competition about that right now. Especially the new Miata RF, but I don't know if we'll see any, especially with a lot of the domestic companies getting rid of their smaller vehicles and sticking to the crossovers and SUVs and trucks. I don't know what the future is going to hold for the enthusiast vehicle in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So speaking of enthusiasts, so let's move on to my last notable announcement at the LA Auto Show. Was around the brand new 992 Porsche 911. So I know that Porsche 911 has been around for a very long time, and so this is the 7th generation of that vehicle. And what they did is they launched the new Carrera and the Carrera S, and it's replacing the 991 variant of the 911. And again, similar to the Mazda 3, it's not a revolution, but the 911 has never really gone boldly with their the new editions of it. It's just an evolution of the previous generation. So it's the power is up by 30 horsepower in the Carrera and the Carrera S to 444 horsepower from that flat plane 6-cylinder turbocharged engine. And some other things that they've done is around the styling. The new Macan, the Cayenne, they've all got those redesigns lately, and the Panamera. So the design has followed those with the solid light bar on the back, the new PDK2 transmission. The PDK has always been sort of the gold standard around double clutch gearboxes, so the fact that they're still working on improving that to from ridiculously fast shifts to even faster in the PDK2. That transmission already is in the new Panameras, so they've already had a bunch of real world testing with it, so that hopefully some of those bugs have been worked out. The nice thing is this new transmission is that apparently it's a bit smaller actually than the old one, which is actually leaving room for potentially in the future. Porsche hasn't announced this yet, but there is physical space left inside of the engine bay because of the reduction in the size of that new PDK2 to potentially put a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid into the 911 range in the future. Again, Porsche hasn't announced it. Everyone's speculating, but I think that would be really, really interesting. especially considering the discussion we had around that e-tron GT concept from Audi earlier. So, yeah, the new Carrera 4S is supposed to get 31.7 mpg, which to me, I think of a 911 and I assume really awful fuel economy. The fact that they can pull 31 miles per gallon out of that is utterly ridiculous to me. And starting price is around 129,000 Canadian. We'll be starting deliveries, I believe, in second half of 2019.
So are you meaning like a hybrid electric assist to improve fuel mileage, or are you meaning like an electric engine to improve horsepower on that, is what you're kind of predicting?
Yeah, like I'm thinking it would be kind of a hybrid assist where it can fill in some of the low-end torque gap that the turbo engine has. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking they'll go. What they did with the 918 Spider, basically the turbocharged engine in that vehicle, the peak torque from the engine really didn't start until 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. So they used those electric motors early on to fill that torque gap, because the electric motors have that instant torque. It just helps even out that torque curve throughout the range.
Well, and I think that's kind of the direction we're going in. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see an all-electric Porsche, but maybe this is just the next step. Maybe I'm just being naive, and we'll be there before we know it.
Yeah, like that new Porsche Taycan, that is an all-electric vehicle, but yeah, it's definitely not something that is competing with their higher-end performance models like the 911. Porsche did announce they will never, ever, ever make an all-electric 911, although the rest of their range seems to be going towards all-electric. So, it's interesting because I don't know how much longer they'll be able to sustain the 911 as, one, naturally aspirated, but two, non-electrified.
Well, and as a performance vehicle, it's going to, when there's four-door family sedans that are willing to compete with it, that 911 might, maybe, you know what, maybe we're going to go to an all-electric Cayman, and then that'll be the day the Cayman surpasses the 911.
Yeah, you never know. I guess we're kind of getting off topic here a little bit, but that Cayman, honestly, that's my favorite Porsche that they sell. It's in that more affordable range for people. It still has similar fun factor as a 911, and similar amenities. So, like, you can't go wrong with it. It doesn't have that 911 heritage with it, but I personally I would prefer a Cayman over a Carrera any day.
Well, I know I'm taking this way off into the brush, Matt, but looking at the differences between the two cars, I get the idea of the 911's got a lot of heritage, decades and decades back. But at what point do you say, you know what, a mid-engine versus a rear engine just makes more sense in terms of handling and balance? I mean, the Cayman eventually will have a long heritage, but I don't know if we'll ever give up that prestige of the 911.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I just wanted to move along here. So I just want to touch on what it's like to be a car enthusiast in Saskatchewan. For those of you listening and have no idea where Saskatchewan is, it's kind of in the middle of Canada, in the prairies. And so we have winter for about 5 months of the year. So that does put a damper on how many nice, modern supercars and things like that you would see. And there definitely isn't as many people with enough money to be purchasing those types of vehicles around here, other than compared to other places in Canada or the US. Some of the highlights for me anyways are there are a lot of car shows. Considering the relatively small population in Saskatchewan, there are a lot of car shows. Basically, throughout the summer months, there's some kind of a car show almost every week, and there's several really major ones throughout the season, like such as the Dragons Car Show or the Rockona 2 Show and Shine, and yeah, those are pretty massive with hundreds and hundreds of cars each. And then there's a variety of car shows throughout the rest of Saskatchewan, in smaller communities. You know, the nice thing about this province is people do band together. You know, we're geographically dispersed, so you know, when people hear about a car show in Assiniboia or Regina or Saskatchewan or Saskatoon, people come to it from all over. So, yeah, that's one thing I do enjoy around here is that that culture of let's support each other.
Well, and I think it's sort of a provincial culture where you do have to travel around. If you live in Regina and there's a concert in Saskatoon, you're going to drive that 2.5 hours to go and see it because that's just the norm here.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So it's not too different to have to travel for a car show, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the cars you see around here, the car shows are typically dominated by older muscle cars. People around here seem to really take care of their old Camaros, the old Challengers, those types of things. You see quite a few really, really well-maintained older muscle cars. There's definitely a much smaller population that has modern cars, and this is often dominated by cars something such as like Civics, Integras, Focuses, those kind of you know, enthusiast level, entry level cars. So
I was going to say, Matt, with our infinite winters, you completely left out the horde of growing Subarus that like to roam around all winter long.
Yeah, the Subarus are definitely getting way more popular here. I see the STIs more now than I ever have. So, you know, that's actually kind of nice to see that people are still buying enthusiast cars around here, even with our challenging climate for sports cars. You do see some other, you know, these sort of halo cars from prior years, such as like the Toyota Supras, Skylines, things like that, that people have imported from Japan. And some of them are very, very nice, and you know, those do typically end up at some of the car shows. So personally, I prefer modern cars, or more modern cars, definitely from the 90s and 2000s and up. So to see some of those cars in the car shows, you know, it is nice for me because it gives a little bit of variety from just the old cars that you see there. And around Saskatoon, where I live, like I said, there's not a ton of high-end sports cars around, but notably there are a few, and because there aren't that many, you notice them. You're like, oh, hey, that was a really cool car that I drove by. So there's a fellow that owns an NSX, a new NSX. There's a few 911s around, you know, some Carreras, some Turbo S's, things like that. A few R8s. There's a Ferrari FF. And personally, I see this one several times a week, but it's a Maserati Granturismo. I know people are quite polarized on Maserati, their views on that brand, but the fact that it's got a Ferrari engine in it, it sounds amazing, accelerating away. And it looks amazing too. Personally, I love it. It's a really sleek car. So, you know, those are the highlights for me around Saskatoon. I know in Regina there's you know, some other car, you know, similar level sports cars. And then there's some other ones sort of spattered around the province.
So I take it you're meaning by higher end like those exotic European cars, because I mean there are those higher end Japanese cars, but I don't think you can max out the cost of a high-end Japanese car, and you'll never come close to reaching the price of some of those exotics.
Yeah, you know what? You see some of those. I think it's called the RC 400, the Lexus, the newer one. I've seen a couple of those around, but I don't know. For me, it's not something that really turns my crank. I personally prefer those, German, Italian sports cars, exotics. I love the new NSX. I know it's got a lot of flack over the last few years, but personally, I love the look of it. It's using that the hybrid powertrain, and I don't know. I don't think it's worth the criticism it gets.
Well, and I think it goes a lot with brand image. People aren't going to look at a new Corvette the same way they're going to look at a new Ferrari, because you also have those generations that had the old Cavaliers and Cobalts and Cruises, and you're going to look at that and go, oh yeah, the same company made this. But when you look at a Ferrari, it's just a Ferrari. There's no Cavalier equivalent of a Ferrari that brings the brand down.
No. Like even Ferrari's entry-level Portofino, it's still an incredible car. The California T that it replaced got a lot of criticism, but that new Portofino, it's just incredible in every way. You see reviews on it online, and people just can't stop raving about it, and that's their entry-level car. And then and then you get into things like the 812 Superfast, and you get into that, that's the sort of ultra exotic, I guess, not hypercar level, like a Koenigsegg or something, but you're getting into that level where you won't see those around in places like Saskatchewan, just because the people aren't around here aren't going to be spending $500,000 and plus on a car.
Well, and I mean, it's just the practicality of it too. People do need to haul things and other people, so you're not going to go and buy a 2-seater sports car to rip around in just because. Yeah,
for sure. Like, you definitely see a lot of Corvettes around here which do fit that bill, but spending $100,000 versus $500,000 is very different. And for, I'm gonna say, similar levels of performance. When you get into that like the ZL1 or ZR1 level trims of the Corvette. So you mentioned that you like to do autocrossing. So can you talk about some of the opportunities people have for going racing around Saskatchewan?
Well, actually, I was just going to segue into that. Way back in the day when I first started autocrossing, Saskatoon had a club. I believe it was called the Saskatoon Sports Car Club, and Regina had a club, the Queen City Motorsports Association. And I think it's only the Queen City Motorsports Association that actually runs auto club events that have points that count towards regional events. But there's still tons of other clubs around Saskatchewan that'll offer sort of that autocrossing experience. You can go out to the BMW club and they rent out the Three Flags track, the Corvette club, and you're not necessarily limited to that brand of car. I think you still have to register with their club and be a member and whatever else. But then they have driver training or events that you can go out and participate in. And depending on the level you want to compete at, if you want to go out and just get the experience, it's great. But if you ever really want to move forward into things like time trialing or anything more serious, you sort of have to join those clubs like the Queen City Motorsports Association, or if you even want to travel to the Winnipeg Sports Car Club to get that licensing and earn the points towards that. It's two very different levels, but there are lots of opportunities. For those of you who are listening that aren't familiar, the Three Flags Motorsports Park used to be an old go-kart track that was purchased and expanded. The track was widened, bigger clubhouse built, different amenities, and you can go out and you can race your car out there. And in a lot of cases, it's probably cheaper than even going and getting into go-karting if you really want to think about it. You can take a street car, as long as it's safe, not filled with junk, has decent tires on it, you can go out and get that experience of ripping around the track for under $50 a day. Loaner helmets are available, and if you really want to start getting into it, going and buying your own for a couple $100s. I mean, aside from that, pretty much all Saskatchewan has, being as flat as we are, is an infinite amount of drag racing opportunities, whether it be legitimate or not. And I'm not encouraging anything illegitimate, but I mean, we have the Saskatchewan International Raceway, different clubs around Saskatchewan use airport strips for drag racing, whether it would be quarter mile, eighth mile, and then everyone's old favorite of oval track is, I mean, you could find an oval track pretty much anywhere you go. So,
yeah,
there's lots of options.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. There are lots of different options around here. On the small scale, like you said, the Saskatchewan International Raceway, or SIR, it does host NHRA events, so that is a full-size drag strip. But if you're into autocrossing and want to go onto a full-size circuit, like you see on TV racing, at Silverstone or any of those famous tracks. If you want to get into anything even close to that, you have to travel a long distance. Like there's tracks in Calgary, Alberta, and Gimli, Manitoba. But really, within 5-6 hours of driving, those are really your only two options.
Yeah, you don't. Saskatchewan's not. It doesn't seem like it's really supporting anything bigger than that. And maybe it's just that we don't have the demographic to support it and the population to support it. But if people are willing to travel, I don't see why that it couldn't become an option here.
Mm-hmm. And there's definitely enough land available. There's land always for sale around cities, so it's just a matter for someone to actually put up that capital to start building a racetrack.
Well, I know at Gimli it was an old airstrip that was converted into it, and it's still used for some training and other things like that, but even just having that foundation would be beneficial as compared to breaking ground and starting new. But
yeah, like
I don't know if that's something we'll see.
Yeah, you look at like the UK, and almost all of their racetracks, including Silverstone, used to be World War II air bases that after the war were abandoned, and people needed to figure out what to do with them. Okay, so I just want to move on to our final topic here. Is because there's not that many opportunities to see sort of exotic level cars, there are lots of good opportunities to purchase affordable sports cars that are still, the fun factor is still really high, but the depreciation has kind of done its thing, and you can get into these cars at a really affordable price. So like there's definitely lots of different options in this range. But Ryan, I think you had some ones you wanted to mention.
Well, I know you've been looking around at some cars, and I know that you've kind of got a specific idea you're looking at. And I'm not trying to totally play to that, but I want to bounce some ideas off you with this. So I know off air, you and I have talked about a 350Z, and I know maybe a 300's a little too old for most people, especially with the twin turbo. It's getting beat up. The maintenance on that would be sometimes atrocious. You're taking a huge risk with a car that old, but you are getting a Japanese classic. Like, you're getting a twin turbo 3-liter V6. But on the other hand, the 350Z is more modern, easier to work on, probably a whole lot less of a headache. It's newer, and in a lot of cases you'll probably be able to find that as a manual, whereas the twin turbo models of the 300s or the Fairladies, generally I've only ever seen them as an automatic. I mean, you can find the rare 5-speed manual here and there, but I mean, that's all personal preference. One thing, here's an idea I wanted to run past you. Now, I know you're not a big fan of rotaries, and I've been there, done that sort of thing, but with the cost of these now, the RX-8s, discontinued, almost every single one needs an engine, for the cost of buying it, and a full rebuild, for easily under 10 grand, you could have essentially a brand new RX-8, 0 kilometers, ready to go.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting option. People beat up on the RX-8 a lot because the RX-7 had such legendary status. You know, I think the RX-8 was actually, it had a lot of good roots, a lot of good, like the base of it was really good. So if you could rebuild that motor and just bump the power up a little bit, but still maintaining the reliability, which in the rotary is not great to start with, but if you could keep the reliability, but bump up the power a little bit, I think that would be a really fun, affordable car, just to have fun in.
Well, and that's why I put that one on the table there, is I feel like it's sort of the underdog of all of this. You're always just going to see them broken and beaten, and people selling them for a few $1,000s in a lot of cases. But I feel like if you were to start fresh and do the proper maintenance and own it, I think it would be something that most people wouldn't consider. Mm-hmm. Now, is that something that a lot of people want to undertake? Maybe, maybe not. But I thought it was kind of the curveball I wanted to throw at you about that. Another one, just kind of taking another turn here, is the Lexus IS300.
Yeah, so, with it shares that legendary 2JZ engine out of the Toyota Supra. So I think that has a lot of people really like that. If you're an enthusiast and know anything about engines, I know that's something that often comes up when we talk about this car.
Although I think a lot of people would be into it for the name of it, like the idea of a 2JZ, but not. They would expect the same thing from the Supra, the twin turbo and that sort of power or that sort of potential. But I think the IS300 leaves you a little bit empty. I think if you were willing to work on it and modify it, that would give you a lot to do. But just as a car itself, it's still a great car. You still have the practicality of a 4-door. You have the option of a 6-speed manual. You still have an inline 6. I'm not saying you're not getting good power out of it. But going from a 2-door twin-turbo car to a 4-door naturally aspirated, I think people's expectations are different. But at the same time, if you're just wanting to get into an affordable sports car, I think that's a great way to go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like that 2JZ engine, it's proven to be bulletproof. It's proven that you can modify the crap out of it, and it just maintains that Toyota and Lexus reliability. And like you said, the IS300 is a great car. It's got good handling. It's practical. It's a 4-door family sedan. And you can get that 6-speed manual. So, yeah, like there's a lot of great points around that car. One that I wanted to throw out there is around the Miata. The Miata is a classic. You can't go wrong with the fun factor around the Miata. And
yeah, I agree with you there.
Soft and hard top options. You can literally go and lift that hard top off all by yourself, and that's got to be on near the top of your list when you're talking about affordable, fun sports cars.
No, sure. I think the only downside you'd have running into a Miata is that limit of having the 2-seater and the limited cargo space. When people are sort of like, not that I disagree at all, and having owned a Miata, I would definitely own one again. I just think in terms of practicality, if you're looking for something that's going to kind of be the do-all car and still be a sports car, people might be deterred by that just because of how few things you can carry and how few people you can have in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 2-seater with extremely limited cargo capacity is something that would really turn me off. But the fun factor, you can't deny. Like, everyone just raves about how much of a hoot it is to drive around. So, yeah, personally, if there could be a little bit more practicality around Miata, that would definitely be at the top of my list.
Well, and I think that's why I would choose a Miata over something like a 350Z. I'm not saying a 350Z isn't great. I love them. They're great cars. but you're still limited by the two-seater, you're limited by the space. And I mean, you get more power in the 350 than you ever would in a Miata. But it's the same kind of idea. If you ever wanted to do anything more with it, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So, which is probably why things like Subaru STIs and Mitsubishi Lancer Evolutions are kind of becoming more popular, or have become more popular. It's a four-door sedan that has all-wheel drive and is turbocharged, and it just checks all those boxes. Mm-hmm. Now, if we're talking affordable, that might not also be the case. It seems like an STI doesn't really like to depreciate too much.
Well, and you have to consider purchase price versus, running cost. Things like a Subaru STI, you might be able to find some, reasonably priced ones to purchase, but, maintenance costs and fuel and, all that can really add up. And the fact that because those turbos are so highly strong in the STIs, like, they're known to blow up. So needing to do, put new turbos in, engine rebuilds, people just, drive these cars and just, buying a second-hand modified Subaru STI or a WRX, you're always taking a risk. But, again, it's kind of like the Miata. The fun factor is insanely high. They make incredible exhaust notes, and there's all the practicality around the four-wheel drive, or the all-wheel drive rather, the four doors, the good trunk space. Yeah, like there's so many good points around those cars, but the only thing that's ever turned me away from it is that reliability of those turbos.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you there. And yeah, like you said before, just the general abuse of the car. Mm-hmm. People aren't going to go and buy an STI just to go pick up groceries every Sunday. Whereas you might find a Civic Si or something along those lines that somebody bought and hasn't abused yet.
Yeah. So, do you have any more on your list that we want to talk about? And I think we should pick one, that we would put at the top of our list out of these options.
No, I didn't have anything else prepared for tonight. I'm sure I'll have some more suggestions for you along the way. I'm sure I'm going to try and convince you to buy one of these days.
So out of those options, so we had the Nissan 350Z, the Nissan 300ZX, the Lexus IS300, the Miata, and then there's the RX-8, and also the WRX or the STI. Out of those six, which one, if you had to choose today and buy one, which one would you pick?
If we're setting a limit of around 10 grand, if I were to go out and do this today, 10 grand, burning a hole in my pocket, had to spend it, I would probably go out and find myself a clean RX-8, yet in need of engine work or an engine rebuild, and start fresh. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you maintained it properly, you really wouldn't have those reliability issues. It's the same sort of idea as the STIs. Is somebody's bought it and beat it down and hasn't taken care of it. The only difference is where the STI is unreliable, the RX-8 is extremely unreliable. You're going to run into a lot more issues with an RX-8 than you ever will with an STI. But if you take the time to take care of it and you're starting fresh with it, I think you can get a better deal of a sports car going that way. Plus you have the option now with the RX-8 of having those suicide doors and kind of a back seat and kind of storage space. So you have that car haul, the people hauler, you have the ability to carry stuff, but you still have a fun, high revving, and potentially reliable sports car depending on how you take care of it. Kind of get the whole package in there for potentially cheaper than any of those other vehicles.
Mm-hmm. And my choice, this is a tough one. Personally, I absolutely love the STI. I've lusted over them from years, but never been able to bring myself to buy one. But you know what? If I was to have to choose out of these six options, I think I'd go with the IS300 because of that. You've got the Toyota build quality. You've got the 2JZ engine, which you can. There's lots of kits out there for turboing them. And you have the rear wheel drive that's and the 6-speed manual that you just can't deny is what people are after for fun factor, and you still get the practicality.
I guess I should have mentioned before, so I guess we're assuming that we're not talking about a JDM Altezza with the 4-cylinder.
No, just the ones you'd see around town. Yeah, just like North American models.
You do have a good argument. I can appreciate that.
The RX-8 is a great choice though, because I think it revs to like 9 or 10,000. Like that's unheard of in lots of other cars, outside of things like the Honda S2000 or some exotics. Just to hear that wail of 9 or 10,000 RPM is, it's just glorious.
I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but before next time, I think we should look into which would actually have better fuel mileage. A straight 6 2JZ naturally aspirated, or a 13B Renesis engine. I'm very curious, because that might sway me one way or the other right now. So for our next debate, I might have to look into that.
Yeah, for the people that don't know, the 13B is the engine that's in the RX-8, that rotary. Which is notorious for having awful fuel economy.
Well, we'll have to see. I'm going to look this up. You may have swayed me to the IS300 on that fact alone.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks a lot, Ryan. This is our first podcast, and I really do appreciate you coming on today, and I look forward to talking to you some more in the future. And for everyone out there who, if you have an idea for us to talk about, please let us know. We'll try our best to include it in an upcoming podcast. You can reach out to us at contact@theapex.ca, and I'll get back to you. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time at the Apex.